For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Some years ago, you presented a paper that criticized the growth of the private security agency. Do you still have concerns about their role in securing safety?
Yes, this is a very controversial topic. I feel strongly about it, and I think many people in the neighborhood where I stay feel very angry and strongly and think that we are not such good neighbors because we don't support the enclosure and a number of things like that. You know, the question about private security needs to be tackled on two levels. On the one hand, all things being equal, what is the best thing in theory? And then secondly, given the conditions in South Africa today, what can be done in relation to private security? In principle, I think it's not a very good thing that you have a situation where the South African police service is outgunned, far outgunned, by the private security industry. It's a danger to any democratic society to have trained private security people having more weaponry than your police force. And it is not desirable in principle that people engage in activities that are the proper functioning of the police service because when they're not members of that service, because it gives them access to information about private citizens that they can misuse. Because if you're busy patrolling an area, you actually get to know habits of people. This one leaves early in the morning. Their domestic worker leaves at such and such a time, so the house is probably not alarmed at this time or that time. And all of that information is security information, and one is entrusting it to a private security industry which is predominantly foreign owned. Now, should a foreign government wish to do something to destabilize a country, the private security industry probably know the movements of some people who they may want to assassinate or attack in one or other way. One of the prices one pays when you have a private security industry company doing protection for you is just as they protect you, they are entrusted with information about you. And they say every person has their price. And these people are not paid very well, so that there's even a danger on that level that money can be used to bribe someone to give information that can endanger some individual for one or other reason. Now, the same can happen with the police, of course. Now, the problem that we have in South Africa is that the South African police service is overstretched. People don't trust the police. They find the police to be corrupt in very many cases. They also find them to not be like the Bobby on the beat in Britain, friendly officials who will just wave to or go and ask how you get to this or that place. They have this fear of the police. So you have a problem in the sense that, first of all, the police are not there. If you phone the police, it may be true, it may be untrue. It is said that the likelihood is they will not come, or if they come, they come long after the danger has passed or the damage has been done. So you have a deep-seated sense that the police are not there. And the police themselves enter into agreements with private security in various areas where they actually support road closures, which are going to be policed by private security. Now, in my opinion, there may be a legal problem with that because the police are the police of the whole of South Africa. They do not have a right, in my view, to cede control to one or other private security industry and say, okay, you do our work more or less. It's not in those exact words, that's what it amounts to. So you have a problem. Consequently, it's also said that you can't rely on the police alone. And it's also said, if you talk to people who work do research in security, but I heard this even before I spoke to them, is if you don't have a private security industry covering your house, you'll have a break-in. And this is like part of folklore, that those who don't have a private security company looking after them will very soon have one because they'll be broken into. And the conclusion that they draw is either that the company has done it or set it up, or that unless they have the company, they will not be safe. Now, what is happening with all of this is an atmosphere is created of fear. People are closing off their streets, they're putting guards in their streets, they're getting CCTV television, they're competing security companies offering picnics and as well as new forms of alarm. And so the atmosphere is also increased by SMSs coming, all the time saying, suspicious looking car coming down the street, be careful. Now you never learn whether it is or not. Now all of this feeds into more and more demand for private security, but it seems to me that there's no evidence that they bring down the crime, no evidence that the gating, the so-called enclosures, are doing it either.
But what option is open to people? And don't you think those that can afford private security are entitled to hire them?
You see, the question of afford is interesting because what we are reproducing in the policing sphere now is the social inequalities of apartheid. Now, it's not, of course, only white people who are now able to afford. And very often, some of the most enthusiastic people in the policing, private policing, are black people who've moved in. And what you have really is a situation like the medieval drawbridge, where at the end of the day, the drawbridge gets pulled up and the rabble who can't afford private security are outside there. Whereas those of us who are the better classes can be protected in a whole lot of ways. You've got all these different security companies in the same small space. And it seems to me that there's still a lot of alerts. Now, the problem with these alerts is that they also become racist. They keep on sending messages about Bravo males, and in the Western Cape, Charlie males, meaning colored males, and that you must be careful of them. And, there's a legitimate fear that people have got, and they want to warn others of this, but it also encourages people to take the law into their own hands. Now, there is a report, there is a website that some people set up. Now, for the moment, I've forgotten it. But some people performed what's called citizen's arrest. They just arrested someone who they thought was loitering, and the person was doing nothing. And you also have people being given smacks, and you have this guy Osrin clearing the streets of prostitutes and commercial sex workers, etc., etc. So what we've got to ask ourselves is, the first prize is for us to clean up the police service and make it a proper national police service, which is demilitarized, which is part of the democratic institutions of South Africa. So that when we turn to the police are professionally competent to address these matters. And we need to cut to a minimum the resort to private security. However, given the corruption that we now have, all of these things, I can understand completely why people are going to them. But I am not sure that's effective, because the evidence on gating seems to show that it has very little effect bringing down crime. But where I stay, it's just this buzz of SMSs, WhatsApps, all these things of more and more threats. So it's not as if the presence of all these private security have brought down the level of fear. In fact, people are creating more and more fear, I think, and it's not good for a country to live in this way.
Seems to be a terrible catch-22.
Well, at the moment, yeah, and I don't know, it's part of our democracy in general.
Thank you very much for your insights.
Thanks a lot.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about safety, racial profiling, and police we can trust.